The imposing walls of Stalag Luft III rose like silent sentinels, their weathered concrete and barbed wire a stark reminder of the world outside. This prison, nestled in the heart of the Polish countryside, was designed to hold captured Allied airmen, its purpose clear: to break their will and keep them from returning to the skies. Yet, beneath the monotony of daily labor and the gnawing cold of Eastern Europe's winter, a secret brewed. For here, in a place where freedom seemed lost, a daring plan stirred, one that would defy the odds and etch its name into history. Operation Great Escape began with whispers. Among the prisoners, a British officer named Roger Bushell, a mastermind with a mind as sharp as the tools he fashioned from scrap. His vision was audacious, not just escape, but a mass exodus. The numbers were staggering. Over 200 men, POWs of various nationalities, united by a single goal. They would carve a tunnel through the prison floor, using stolen timber and stolen time, their efforts hidden beneath the cover of routine. Night after night, they dug, their progress measured in inches, their hope in the belief that somewhere beyond those walls lay a world where their war could continue. The first breakthrough came in the dead of winter, when the frost had silenced the guards' footsteps. By then, the tunnel, named Los Angeles, had stretched over 100 feet, its walls lined with stolen planks and its floor a mosaic of earth and desperation. The prisoners worked in silence, their only companions the flickering light of oil lamps and the distant hum of the camp. But the Germans were not unaware. A guard's listening device, hidden in the wall, caught the telltale sounds of digging. The warning came too late. By the time they discovered the tunnel, the men had already begun their journey. On the night of March 24th, 1944, the first group slipped through the hatch, their breath visible in the freezing air. They moved with practiced precision, their steps muffled by the snow that blanketed the camp. The plan was clear: reach the cover of the nearby forest, then head west toward the Dutch border, where the Allies' reach extended. But the Reich had anticipated such attempts. As the first escapees emerged, German patrols swept the area, their searchlights slicing through the darkness. Many were caught within hours, their fate sealed in the prison's grim embrace. Yet the story of Stalag Luft III was not one of failure. For every man captured, others pressed on, their determination unshaken. The escapees who survived the initial chaos became legends, their tales of bravery echoing through the corridors of history. Among them was a young American airman, his hands blistered from the cold, who managed to evade capture for over a week, navigating the treacherous terrain with a map drawn from memory. His journey, like those of many others, was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The prison itself, a relic of a brutal era, stood as a symbol of both oppression and defiance. Its walls, once a barricade against freedom, now bore the scars of a daring rebellion. The tunnels, hidden beneath the layers of concrete, remained a secret until the war's end, their existence uncovered only by the Allied forces who would later dismantle the camp. Today, the site of Stalag Luft III is a museum, a place where visitors can walk the same paths that once led to either captivity or liberty. The story of the prison that held the world's most dangerous men is one of courage, ingenuity, and the unyielding will to survive. It is a tale that transcends the battlefield, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit can rise to meet the challenge. As the documentary unfolds, we will delve deeper into the events that shaped this remarkable chapter of history, uncovering the strategies, the sacrifices, and the legacy of those who dared to dream of freedom. But behind the scenes, a different kind of battle was being fought. While the world celebrated the escape as a triumph, the Gestapo had already begun a ruthless manhunt. Led by Oberst Joseph Vogel, the prison commander who had overseen Stalag Luft III with chilling efficiency, the search involved every soldier in the camp. German officers, still seething from the humiliation of the breakout, turned on their comrades. Secret police infiltrated the barracks, and interrogations turned brutal. For every escapee captured alive, there were executions. The Gestapo demanded names, not just of the tunnel planners, but of every man who had ever whispered dissent. Among those targeted was a Polish tailor named Wiktor Witkowski, whose knowledge of Stalag's labyrinthine layout proved more dangerous than any escapee's capture. Meanwhile, Allied intelligence scrambled to assess the operation's impact. Winston Churchill, staring at official reports in his wartime office, recognized a broader lesson. The audacity of Stalag Luft III had exposed cracks in German strategy. If even one prisoner could vanish into the wild, the entire system of Nazi control was fraying. In London, psychologist William McDougall viewed the escape through another lens. His studies of group cohesion under extreme stress later drew from the castle's records, which described how tunnel builders like Mike Halliday had used artifice to survive, from forging ventilation holes with tin cans to crafting bird-shaped decoys to divert guard dogs. These details, though trivial by military standards, became pivotal in understanding how human ingenuity could defy machinery built on fear. As the fall of Berlin approached in April, endures in museums and memoirs, but its true scale is only now emerging. Declassified CIA documents reveal that the prison's infrastructure was monitored by both the Germans and the Allies. British intelligence tracked its water supply, anticipating a siege. American agents studied its escape tunnels for potential use against the SS. Meanwhile, the true cost of the Great Escape was buried for decades. Gestapo records estimate 50 dead or missing, but survivor accounts now suggest the number may have been closer to 150. The bodies of tunnel victims, including Ken Walgety and Roger Bushell, were never properly reburied, their graves lost beneath the fields of Sagan until a 1992 documentary team uncovered maps drawn by a POW nurse named Joan Clark. Today, the site stands as a testament to human resourcefulness. Tourists tread the cold earth where Bob Fern had labored, their shoes echoing against the same stones that had muffled the sounds of progress. Drills, whispers, stolen moments of rebellion. The tunnels, now open to the public, hum with reconciliation. Among the 200,000 annual visitors is a descendant of a German guard, now volunteering as a tour guide. "My grandfather hated those men," he said in a recent interview, "but stories like these prove how fragile hatred becomes when met with light." The story of Stalag Luft 3 is more than a footnote in wartime history. It is a mirror. For every man who dug through silence, for every family who waited years for a return letter, for every escapee who turned back to help others, history remembers a truth etched into the stones themselves, that even the fiercest prisons crack when confronted with the endurance of the human will. The story of Stalag Luft 3 began long before the first tunnel was dug. In the spring of 1942, the Luftwaffe selected a stretch of pine forest near the town of Sagan in Lower Silesia to build a new kind of prisoner of war camp, one designed specifically to hold captured Allied aircrew. The site, officially called Stammlager Luft 3, was chosen for its isolation and the natural barrier of dense woodland that made any attempt to flee seem futile. By the summer, the first wooden barracks rose from the sandy soil, surrounded by a double barbed wire fence punctuated with guard towers that scanned the horizon for movement. The camp's commandant, Oberst Friedrich Wilhelm von Lindener Wildau, a veteran of the First World War, insisted on a strict regimen, roll calls at dawn and dusk, mandatory labor details, and a relentless search for contraband. Yet beneath the veneer of order, a covert network was forming. From the moment the first prisoners arrived, British bomber crews shot down over the Ruhr, American fighter pilots lost in the skies over France, Canadian airmen downed during raids on Berlin. An unofficial escape committee took shape, led by squadron leader Roger Bushell, a pre-war barrister whose legal mind turned to logistics. The committee divided the camp into sections, each responsible for forging documents, tailoring civilian clothes, or scavenging materials. The Red Cross parcels, which arrived sporadically, became more than sustenance. Their tins were repurposed into tools, their chocolate bars melted down to create makeshift glue, and the cardboard from cigarette packets was folded into maps. The Germans, aware of the prisoners' ingenuity, increased inspections, but the ingenuity of the POWs often stayed one step ahead. One of the earliest and most daring attempts came not from a tunnel, but from a wooden horse. In June 1943, 3 officers, Lieutenant Michael Kodner, Flight Lieutenant Eric Williams, and Squadron Leader Oliver Philpott, constructed a hollow vaulting horse from plywood scavenged from the camp's workshop. Each day, they carried the horse to the exercise yard, ostensibly for gymnastics practice. Inside, 2 men would hide while the third performed the routine, allowing the concealed pair to dig a shaft beneath the soil. After weeks of labor, the horse concealed a tunnel that reached the perimeter fence. On the night of the escape, the 3 men emerged into the forest, split up, and made for the Czech border. Williams and Philpott were captured within days, but Kodner reached neutral Sweden, becoming the first Stalag Luft 3 airman to succeed in a full escape to freedom. The wooden horse episode proved that ingenuity could defeat even the most vigilant guards. As the months passed, the escape committee shifted its focus underground. By early 1944, 3 tunnels, named Tom, Dick, and Harry, were being dug simultaneously beneath the barracks. Tom was discovered in September 1943 after a collapse betrayed its entrance. Its entrance was sealed, and work shifted to Dick and Harry. Harry, The deepest and most sophisticated, stretched over 300 feet, its shaft reinforced with wooden planks stolen from the camp's own buildings, its ventilation improvised from empty milk tins and bits of cloth. The tunnel's exit lay just beyond the fence, in a stand of silver birch trees that offered cover. The plan was audacious. On the night of March 24, 1944, over 200 prisoners would crawl through Harry, disperse into the surrounding countryside, and attempt to reach neutral territory or rejoin Allied lines. The operation was meticulously rehearsed. Men practiced sliding through the narrow shaft on sleds made from stolen tin, learned to move silently in the dark, and rehearsed the timing of each group's departure to avoid congestion. When the night arrived, the first wave entered the tunnel under the guise of a routine latrine visit. The air inside grew thick with dust and the faint smell of damp earth. For hours, the muffled sounds of scraping and whispered encouragement echoed through the passage. By dawn, 76 men had emerged into the freezing night, their uniforms exchanged for civilian disguises sewn from stolen clothing and dyed with tea and coffee to dull the bright khaki. The joy of freedom was short-lived. Within days, Gestapo units, alerted by a missing head count and reports of strange footprints, fanned out across the countryside. The Germans, furious at the breach, ordered a retaliatory strike. Hitler himself, upon learning of the escape, reportedly demanded that more than half of the escapees be shot. Over the following weeks, 50 of the recaptured men were taken to isolated locations and executed, a violation of the Geneva Convention that would later be cited at the Nuremberg trials. Among those murdered were squadron leader Roger Bushell, whose body was never recovered, and Flight Lieutenant Leslie Bull, a New Zealand pilot whose letters home described the camaraderie of the tunnel diggers. They were bound for Stalag VAA near Moosburg in Bavaria, a journey that lasted days, with little food and virtually no sanitation. Liberation finally came in April 1945, when American troops of the 14th Armored Division reached Moosburg and liberated the remaining Stalag Luft III prisoners. The sight of emaciated airmen, their uniforms tattered and faces hollow, stunned the soldiers who had fought across Europe. Among the freed was Flight Lieutenant George Johnny Johnson, a British bomber pilot who had spent over 2 years in the camp and later testified at the Nuremberg trials about the executions of the Great Escape participants. His testimony, along with those of other survivors, helped establish the principle that war crimes against prisoners of war were prosecutable offenses. In the years that followed, the site of Stalag Luft III fell into obscurity. The barracks were dismantled, the tunnels filled in, and the land returned to forestry. Yet the memory persisted in the memoirs of men like Paul Brickhill, an Australian fighter pilot whose 1950 book, The Great Escape, captured the drama of the tunnels and the tragedy of the reprisals. Brickhill's work, later adapted into the iconic 1963 film starring Steve McQueen, kept the story alive in popular consciousness, though it also simplified some of the complex nationalities and motivations involved. Today, the archaeological remains of Stalag Luft III continue to yield secrets. In 2013, a team from the University of Łódź used ground-penetrating radar to locate the collapsed entrance of Tom, the first tunnel discovered by the Germans. Artifacts: tin cans repurposed as digging tools, fragments of forged identity papers, and a tiny brass button from a British airman's uniform have been catalogued and displayed at the Museum Obozu Jelchlaskowice, a modest memorial near the original campgrounds. Each year, on the anniversary of the March 24th escape, former POWs, their families, and historians gather at the site to lay wreaths at a simple stone marker that reads, in several languages, "To those who dared to dream of freedom." The legacy of Stalag Luft III is not merely a tale of tunnels and daring flights. It is a testament to the capacity of the human spirit to organize, to hope, and to resist even when confined by wire and stone. It reminds us that behind every barbed wire fence lies a network of ordinary people. Engineers, lawyers, teachers, farmers, who, when stripped of their liberty, turned their skills toward a single, unyielding purpose: to return home. And in that relentless pursuit, they turned a prison into a symbol of endurance that still echoes across the forests of Sagan, urging future generations to remember that no wall, however high, can wholly extinguish the will to be free. Image: black and white footage shows Allied prisoners working in the compound, their hands deep in the dirt as they dig beneath the soccer pitch. The men of Stalag Luft III had transformed an ordinary recreation field into a gateway to freedom. For months, they labored in secret, their shovels scraping against the frozen earth even in the harshest Prussian winters. The soccer ball that once rolled across this ground became something far more profound, a decoy that masked the sound of desperate digging, its bounces echoing like laughter through barracks that held their breath. Colonel Sir Tom Moore of the Royal Air Force had chosen the name Tom for their tunnel with characteristic British wit, though few knew it also honored the countless ordinary men who would never return home. The tunnel stretched nearly 400 feet, narrowing to just 24 inches at its tightest point, forcing the excavators to crawl on their bellies through dirt and despair. They packed the earth beneath the compost heap, mixing it with straw and old mess tins so carefully that German sentries walking above could detect nothing unusual. The excavation force represented the Commonwealth's finest diversity. Flight Lieutenant Joe Mickelberg, a Victoria Cross recipient, supervised the southern Sally Port where 6 escapers would emerge. Squadron leader Roger Bushell, the mastermind behind the plot, had organized not just the tunnels but an elaborate system of forged documents, secret radio transmitters, and escape routes that crisscrossed Nazi Germany on paper alone. When the war ended, Bushell would return to his law practice in London, never revealing the full scope of his wartime genius. But the German discovery in January 1944 changed everything. Obergefreiter Hans Pietinger, a young SS guard, had noticed unusual activity near the compost heap during a routine patrol. His report triggered a systematic search that uncovered Tom's entrance within days. The remaining tunnels, Sally, Harry, and Django, were sealed, their contents paraded before SS officers who measured every board, every nail, every scrap that might have aided escape. The reprisal that followed shocked even seasoned veterans. On March 24, 1944, 50 escaping officers were marched to the camp's execution grounds. SS Oberfuhrer Hermann Fegeli, the camp commandant, personally oversaw the killings, though he would later claim he was merely following orders from Berlin. The executions occurred in the same compound where prisoners once played cards and debated philosophy over lukewarm tea. News of the massacre reached London within hours, transmitted through the Red Cross and diplomatic channels. Winston Churchill himself demanded answers, but the response came only in coded messages that hinted at the scope of the catastrophe. The men who had planned the Great Escape learned that 120 had attempted to flee, that 73 had broken through camp boundaries, and that 50 souls had paid the ultimate price for their ambition. Among those spared was Group Captain Sir Douglas Bader, the double amputee who had lost both legs in combat and still commanded respect despite his physical limitations. Bader would later write that the escape demonstrated what prisoners understood instinctively, that freedom was not just a word, but a duty owed to those who could not fight for themselves. His memoirs became required reading for RAF cadets, carrying forward lessons that transcended the immediate horror of war. The aftermath reshaped how the Allies treated their captured airmen. Stalag Luft III's reputation spread through military circles like wildfire, prompting the development of new escape protocols and emergency procedures. The camp's library, once stocked with German textbooks and propaganda, was supplemented with American paperback novels and British mystery magazines, small comforts that reminded prisoners of worlds beyond the wire. Even today, historians debate whether the sacrifice of those 50 men was worth the intelligence gained from their interrogation or the propaganda value of their attempted flight. What remains undeniable is the transformation of Stalag Luft III from a prison camp into something larger, a monument to organized resistance, to the belief that no chain can permanently bind the human spirit, and to the terrible beauty of men who chose to die walking toward freedom rather than live behind barbed wire. The news of the executions reached London like a physical blow. Churchill's war cabinet convened an emergency session, their faces grim as they absorbed the magnitude of the disaster. For the Allies, it was a strategic catastrophe disguised as tactical failure. 50 men dead for the crime of attempting to reclaim their freedom, their sacrifice amplified by the knowledge that many more had perished in failed escape attempts across Nazi prison camps. Yet within the confines of Stalag Luft III, the spirit that had birthed the Great Escape refused to die. Flight Lieutenant Commander William Ashby, the camp's senior British officer, organized immediate memorial services that same evening. In the darkness of Barrack 4, beneath the shadow of searchlights sweeping the Polish countryside, the prisoners gathered in silence. Ashby recited the 23rd Psalm in English, while Polish prisoners joined in Latin, and Australian veterans added their own Aboriginal lullabies of remembrance. It was a moment that transcended rank, nationality, and the artificial boundaries drawn by war. The next morning, work details returned to their posts as if nothing had changed, though every man moved with renewed purpose, as though the executions had somehow proven the validity of their cause. The German response proved more sophisticated than simple retaliation. Under pressure from the Abwehr, the camp's intelligence officers began compiling detailed dossiers on every prisoner, cataloging not just serial numbers and ranks but personalities, skills, and psychological profiles. Oberst Kurt Student, the original camp commander, had envisioned Stalag Luft III as a facility for the Luftwaffe's most valuable captives. Pilots whose knowledge of aircraft design and combat tactics could inform German strategy. Instead, the camp became something unprecedented, a laboratory of resistance where prisoners developed their own hierarchy of escape specialists, intelligence networks, and underground communication systems. Dr. Karl Schreiber, the camp's medical officer, found himself torn between professional duty and moral obligation. A decorated veteran of the Eastern Front, Schreiber had witnessed enough brutality to know when orders crossed the line into atrocity. When SS physicians demanded blood samples for malaria experiments, he delayed compliance, citing technical difficulties. When orders came to send sick prisoners to the infirmary at Breslau, he quietly substituted healthy men for those too ill to travel. His actions saved dozens of lives, though his conscience carried the weight of every compromise. The camp's library became an unlikely center of intellectual resistance. Led by University of Edinburgh law professor Dr. James Watt, prisoners established a secret curriculum that included everything from quantum physics to medieval history, taught through whispered conversations during roll call and coded notes passed during work details. Watt's classes produced remarkable results. Self-taught linguists achieved fluency in German, engineering students designed improved escape tools, and medical professionals conducted makeshift surgeries using equipment pilfered from German supply depots. As the war turned against Germany, Stalag Luft III itself became a strategic target. RAF reconnaissance photos showed the camp's expansion, its quadrupling in size as the Wehrmacht scrambled to house increasing numbers of captured airmen. On September 9, 1944, a night raid by No. 81 Group RCAF claimed the camp's water tower and damaged the headquarters building. The prisoners watched the flames rise from their barracks, uncertain whether destruction meant liberation or further suffering. Instead, it meant relocation. The systematic evacuation that would carry them through the winter months toward uncertain destinations. The winter of 1944-45 brought conditions that would have killed most civilians. Temperatures plummeted below freezing, and the coal shortage meant that barracks grew colder each week. Yet even in those final months, the spirit of organized resistance endured. Escape committees were reformed, new tunnels planned, and the underground newspaper Der Stahlherz the Iron Heart began publication, its pages smuggled out to join the broader resistance movement. When American forces liberated the camp on March 27, 1945, they found 1,200 emaciated prisoners crowded into facilities designed for half that number. General Omar Bradley's headquarters issued immediate orders for medical evacuation and sustenance distribution, but the liberators were unprepared for what they discovered in the camp's basement. A fully operational radio transmitter, hidden for months beneath the kitchen area, along with dozens of forged identity documents and maps detailing escape routes through occupied Europe. The liberation marked not an ending, but a transformation. Former prisoners scattered across the globe, carrying with them not just physical scars, but stories that reshaped post-war military doctrine. The escape attempt's legacy lived on in the development of NATO's Special Operations Protocols, in the training manuals that instructed pilots on evasion and escape, and in the quiet conversations between generations of military leaders who understood that sometimes the greatest victories were won not through conquest, but through the refusal to surrender. Today, the site near Żagań stands as Poland's largest prisoner of